But let's talk about this, fam, because this is about RFK. And obviously we have different feelings about him. On the record out there, I do not approve or like his stance on Israel. However, even Zionists don't deserve to get censored. This is something that Rand Paul talked about. There should be freedom for communists in America to speak their word, their language, and whatnot. So censorship is bad for everybody. So let's get into this topic over here. And thank you, AREM, and thank you to all the Rokfin people over there as well. So what do we got up first? We have a little video from Niko House, our comrade, our man. Fam, can you remember when we started doing this, just me, you, and Niko all hanging out back in the days? Look at us now. Look at us now, Ma. Here's a little video. Let's go ahead and play this, and we'll get some opinions on this as we get the ball rolling.
During a congressional committee hearing specifically talking about social media and censorship, presidential candidate RFK Jr. revealed that YouTube took him down. Now, given his history of advocacy, some people may think that he was taken down from talking about one of those Pfizer or Moderna products. But no, he was just talking about his campaign, and they completely removed him from the platform. And this isn't even actually the first time that we've seen the Alphabet Corporation do something like this with a candidate, because if you remember, Google actually suspended Tulsi Gabbard's ad account after she was trending #1 after putting the hammer to Kamala's campaign. Yeah, we all enjoyed that very much. But we have now seen this happen with two different Democratic primary presidential candidates, both not well liked by the Democrats. And the censorship has actually been advocated for by the Democrats. In fact, before the start of the censorship hearing, Democrats voted to try and censor RFK Jr. He can't make this shit up. So my question to you is, why isn't this considered election interference? And also, why is the Democratic Party advocating for election interference from big tech companies that seemingly and exclusively only benefit their party?
Fam, do you want to start off with that right off the bat, or do you want me to just kind of have at it real quick?
Okay, well, I'm just going to say censoring RFK is wrong. Censoring anybody, as bad as their opinion may be, is wrong, including Nazis. This is a reason why the ACLU at one point was fighting for Nazis to be able to march down the street. One, you need to allow people to see how ugly that is and that it exists. Otherwise, people aren't going to see it exist. Two, if you have to not censor opinions that are unpopular, because that's the point. You argue against them so you can say this is why this is wrong. The Democratic Party, to answer Niko's question, is doing this and calling for interference from big tech because they've been doing it for years. Because as they said, and Niko knows this, they are a private corporation that can choose who is the nominee, and they can make the decision without questions asked, without telling you, which is why I think it's stupid for people to continue to vote for Democrats, because they already told you they don't care who you want. They're going to choose who they want. So that's why I think it's dumb. But aside from Robert F. Kennedy's Zionism, which I'm also going to mention, I think it's wrong that they're trying to censor him. They're clearly trying to censor him because they don't want his opinions on COVID, his research on COVID to get out, and all of these topics that he's actually good on, at least better than the other candidates on. And they're using, obviously, the trope of anti-Semitism to go at him, which is even more ridiculous because he is, in my opinion, the most Zionist candidate we have. Perhaps, at the very least, in the Democratic Party. And I'll say why later. But yeah, that's just what I want to say right off the bat. I think it's wrong.
Obviously, his doubling down is very. I wish he would just shut the fuck up already. Like, stop doubling down. But obviously, you see the fact, and we're going to go through some of these clips, that the Democrats themselves are trying to say that he's anti-Semitic. And he wasn't just good on it, fam. He was the best by far of it. I mean, there was a video in 2021, I believe. Somebody was just talking about this, where he was talking about certain batches of the shot were more deadly than others. Jimmy just recently did a story, and this is stuff we were doing in real time, ladies and gentlemen, which he was great at. I think that Cornel West is the best when it comes to Israel. The way he speaks about it, his whole language, he understands, he knows how to convey it. I think he's the best at it. I think that RFK is best when it comes to the COVID protocols. And like I said, I wish he would just shut up. But even people like Mindy Winston, right? Misty Winston, Mindy Moneybags. Go ahead and throw this tweet up there as well. You know, she doesn't like RFK at all. At all. She cannot stand him at all. This stance is a red line for her, and I accept her for that. That's her decision. She even said today Democrats attempted to censor another Democrat at a hearing about censorship. Our country is a clown show. And then the very next tweet she had, as people were coming after, like, wait a second, Misty, I don't understand something. I thought you didn't like RFK. Why are you defending him? What's going on over here? Well, Misty then replied her next tweet. It's amazing to me how many people are confused as to why I am defending RFK in the regards to censorship, given that I dislike him intensely. We know that. I mean, it's called being consistent. I'm against censorship in any and all of its forms, even when it's applied to people I don't like. Thank you, Misty Winston, for this position. And this is what it should be like, guys. You know, I get it. You don't like them. You don't like a certain other people. Nobody should be censored. Censorship is one of the worst things that could happen to us as a society. When it came to COVID, I said the worst thing about COVID was the censorship, that we didn't allow doctors' voices to come into the room, that we only allowed one side, because when you censor somebody, there's two people who are paying a price. The one person who's being censored and those who should be listening to what's being said, they are also being censored. Go ahead, fam.
Yeah, and I haven't seen people who have criticized RFK in the same vein that me or Misty have be happy about him getting censored. I don't know. I haven't seen that. I'm obviously the people who call him an anti-vaxxer and all this other crap. Yeah, they're probably cheering and happy that he's getting censored. But those aren't the reasons why I dislike RFK. So I want to make sure that's clear, that people like Misty and I are consistent when it comes to why we dislike RFK. Does not mean that he should be censored by any means whatsoever. And yeah, I mean, he's definitely the best one on COVID. Hands down, no questions asked. I was talking about, on Ukraine and Russia, there, he's okay. I mean, comparatively to others, he's much better. But, the thing is, he shouldn't be censored regardless. And I agree with Misty's take on that. In the United States, I think that definitely applies in the United States in terms of censoring people, and in terms of, what we call censoring people. The way this is being politically motivated by the Democratic Party is nothing new, though. This is what they do. It's disgusting. And in the end, it's going to actually help him, because they are censoring him for the wrong, like, they're censoring him and saying he's doing something that he's not, that he's being anti-Semitic, when he's actually being the opposite of anti-Semitic. He's being pro-Zionist. That's why I think it's so funny that it's like, what are you doing? Like, if you wanted to actually call him out for the right things, you could, but they can't do that because they're also bad on those issues too. So they can't. So it's just kind of like it's a clown show, really.
Well, let's talk about before we get into the trial itself. I think we have some things that we want to point out, fam, that we wanted to do it in this point right now, because I will tell you this much, I don't like his stance on it whatsoever, and I wish he would just shut up at this point now. But it almost seems like the pushback from the Democrats is having him double down on this shit. So let's show some of these tweets right now too, as well, to explain exactly what's going on. Go ahead, Cheese Slice, throw them on up. What do you got over here, fam?
All right, so I put this is Misty now. Because so basically what happened is Ava Bartlett retweeted or quote tweeted RFK, and his tweet was, and I'll go to it. If you can go to his original tweet, if you click on hers, you'll be able to see his. If you click on her tweet, you'll be able to see. Yeah. You should be able to see. There it is. So he said, the Biden administration extends U.S. habit of interfering in other countries' domestic politics, now threatening Israel with the ending of the special relationship between our two nations. As president, my support of Israel will be unconditional. this is something that really I want, and this is to you, Pasta, and to anybody. Find me a candidate that has said, I will give unconditional support to Israel. I haven't seen a single candidate that will say that. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you find the candidate, I'll retract. But I haven't seen a candidate.
I haven't seen somebody say unconditional, but I heard people say if there wasn't an Israel, we'd have to create an Israel. I know there's one president who moved the embassy into Jerusalem. So, I mean, there are other situations. I get it. You know what I'm saying? Zionism is Zionism. I think they're all Zionists across the board. And here's the thing that I want to point out, fam, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because I think what he is doing is at least he's being honest about the way he feels, as much as I hate it. But with the squad, they're openly bullshitting and lying and acting like they're anti-Israel. When push comes to shove, they'll bend the knee.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. At least he is being honest about his Zionism. That doesn't change the fact that that's exactly what he is. And so if you go back, Jamie, to Eva's tweet, that's what she was responding to, right? Unconditional, no matter how many times Israel bombs Syria, no matter how many Palestinians are murdered, etc. So, journalists, blah, etc. So that's what, and of course, Eva's been to Syria, she's been to Palestine, she's been in the line of fire. She has a different perspective as a journalist who has been to these places on how important that could be from the United States. Now, Misty, even though she supports the RFK's right to speak and not being, censored, she says we shouldn't trust somebody that is going to give their unconditional support to Israel. And to me, as an anti-imperialist, it includes Israel. Israel is basically the United States' extended military occupation. It is also intelligence apparatus in the Middle East. It's literally just the last family, I think, in the old city got kicked out after a 70 years of having a house, and they had to get kicked out by Zionists, and that's just going to continue happening until there's no Palestinians left, because that's their that's their prerogative. So for me, it's not just an issue that I can brush aside. I think the reason is because we fund Israel. Without us, Israel wouldn't exist. Like, without the United States, the UK, and now NATO, Israel wouldn't exist. It wouldn't have the weapons. It wouldn't have the funding. It wouldn't have the money. And they tout themselves as a democracy. In fact, right now they're having protests in their country because they passed a new reform law that is going to give the Supreme Court more power, or the government more power over the Supreme Court, and they're really upset. And you have like these, super right-wing factions fight. And when I mean right-wing, I mean like fascistic factions. And so really, when it comes to Israel, it's not something I can say, well, the Palestinians and the Syrians are going to have to fight it out with Israel and Iran, of course, because they will have to fight it out. They will obviously have to do that. But in terms of the United States' role in it may not be decided in a government faction by the United States, but the United States gives continued support to Israel. So to me, in that way, we will always have some sort of imperialist allegiance if we continue to support. And when people say, well, all of the candidates are Zionists, they all suck. So, it doesn't matter. They all suck. I just think that's missing the point, that the reason that is because none of them actually stand up to the Israeli lobby. And you can say it's because his father was killed and all this crap, whatever the case may be. But if you're running to actually change the system, which it seems some people think that's what he's doing, you're not going to do the whole thing. And so this is a tweet, fam, and I'll let you respond in a minute. This is a tweet that really pissed me off, obviously, and pissed a lot of people off too, where he is meeting with Rabbi Shmuley, and to
Rabbi
discuss
who?
the establishment. Shmuley, right?
Shmuley.
Yeah, and to discuss the establishment's.
It just sounds funny when you say it. Shmuley. Sorry.
Craven attempt to use spurious anti-Semitism charges derail my peace and freedom candidacy. So again, not only is he's saying that he's pledging unconditional support to Israel, but he's meeting with one of the most Zionist people that exists, and obviously, and like Pasta said, he's doubling down on this. And so when the Democrats say he's being anti-Semitic, instead of saying, "Well, I support Palestinians' right to exist," or "I support Palestinians this, but also Israel," he's not even doing that. He's literally saying, "I pledge my unconditional support, and I'm going to meet with this guy, this rabbi who is an ultra Zionist, and we're going to have this event called Kennedy Israel." Like, I just don't understand. Then I guess it's, to me, he seems like just another. He might as well have, and I'm not saying this, to mean like the team blue or red, but he seems more to me like a Republican candidate because of his stance on Israel is so extreme. I find it more extreme than Biden's. At the end of the day, they're all, as you said, Zionist, and I don't think that's changing with anybody running as a Democrat. But this is something that it is a red line for me, in spite of the fact that I don't think the United States is going to be leading the fight. It's definitely coming from Iran, Palestine, and the Axis
Riyadh.
resistance.
Yeah, there's, like we talked about the other day. Is what's going to happen in Israel is not going to be determined right here in the United States.
But the United States funds them.
Yeah.
If that funding were to stop, what does Israel have?
Yeah.
If that funding were to stop.
That's the thing.
So
absolutely. And I think, like we said, a lot more information is going to come out of Riyadh. It's going to come out of Iran. It's going to come out of that region as things, especially as the Arab world, the pan-Arabism is starting to unite, and the next tweet we got real quick. Hey.
Yeah. So as I said, right, it's wrong, but I just don't think you can be really anti-establishment and support the United States' largest military and intelligence occupation in the Middle East. I mean, that's why they're there. That's why Israel's there. They're there to continue the expansion, just like Ukraine. Ukraine is supposed to be yet another Israel in this region, in the Eastern European region, in between the West and the East. That's really what Ukraine is supposed to be. So again, if you're actually really going to go against the establishment and going to go against the intelligence apparatus, but you're somehow pledging your allegiance to Israel, I mean, Israeli intelligence is one of the most nefarious parts of the whole intelligence apparatus. I just don't buy it. I don't buy that you're actually serious about doing that. He may be good on COVID. He may be good on other things. People might be voting, single issue voters when it comes to this stuff on the United States. But that's not something I'm willing to ignore and just let go, because it has bigger implications than Palestine, Syria, and Iran. It has the implications in general to the intelligence apparatus and the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, and listen, fam, that's every right for you to feel that way. I would never begrudge you for feeling that way, but this is why I made this tweet over here too. Well, I truly hate RFK Jr., his position on Israel, but guess what? It's not the only issue. Have we forgotten about what's happened during COVID-19? And when I talk about, unfortunately, according to the mindset of United States American voters, that foreign policy, especially when it comes to Israel-Palestine, it's so low on their priority list, as whereas COVID-19 is so high on their priority list. Like we talked about these one-issue voters. And I don't begrudge you for thinking that way, and if he crossed the red line and you don't want to support him, I get it. But I don't think we should hold that against other people for feeling differently. A lot of people feel strongly about what happened during the COVID protocols. And that's why I said in the beginning of the shows, I'm going to start talking about some of this stuff again. I went away from a lot of it. I've been paying attention to it. I didn't bring it full-fledged like we did during the whole COVID, the whole pandemic. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And, when you talk about the actual deaths and numbers, what happened from COVID-19, not just the disease itself or the virus itself, but what's happening right now from the safe and effective vaccine, that carries a lot of weight for some people. And I don't think that could just be brushed off the table. And, I hate to use this word cost, benefit analysis of sorts, especially what's going on in Israel, because my heart bleeds for what's going on for these Palestinians. The other day, Vanessa Beeley put up a video of a Palestinian returning to see his house blown to smithereens, and what they're doing. They're constantly removing people from their houses. It's disgusting. It really is. And I can't stand his stance on it. But I still strongly feel it's not the only issue. I understand where you're coming from, but I'm not going to begrudge anybody the other way on how they feel about this whole situation. So that's where I am.
I'm going to begrudge people. I am begrudging people because I think it's a very American-centric point of view. And I understand the COVID situation. I agree. Like what he did on COVID, it was far ahead of what anybody else did. Yeah. So I understand why people feel that way about what his stance was on COVID. However, he's supporting Israel, #1 vaccinated country. Nobody has asked him yet why, if Israel's such a wonderful free democracy, why is it? And he has unconditional support for Israel. Why is he not talking about the fact that they were literally the most vaccinated country and all of this stuff? And it's just, to me, like he's calling a country that's a democracy. And he didn't just say, I support a 2-state solution, because that wouldn't have even been as bad at all. You wouldn't see me here being the way I am, but he literally said that Israel has never killed Palestinians, that they're like literally painted them like angels. And that's outright lying. So if you're lying about that, then what else are you going to lie about? I mean, I'm just not a single issue person. I do think it's important that he is highlighting these discussions about COVID, that he is highlighting these discussions at least better than others when it comes to Ukraine. But again, there's like issues with that as well that I have. And to me, it's like an anti-imperialist position. I could never just, ignore that. And I know you're not asking me to or whatever, but for me, it's one of those things that it would go against everything that I stand for, that I've stood for all these years, to support somebody like him, because and I think this is why you were getting into it with some people, because they feel just as strongly. The whole attacks on Kennedy, calling him an anti-vaxxer, calling him a crazy lunatic, I think those are really stupid attacks, because he's right on all the COVID stuff. He was far and wide. So when the left criticizes him on that and anti-vaxxer bullshit, I think it's so stupid, and you're giving him more credence because he was absolutely right on COVID. But for me, the issue is far and beyond his attempt to placate, even when he talked about the CIA, very good people. Like, it feels like this is somebody that still believes in the system. He doesn't want to change it. And of course, like I mentioned before, and he's running as a Democrat. So, and I know, nobody can get through, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, I didn't even want to discuss the election in the United States, because I believe we're beyond electoral politics, right? And I believe that it's just not going to happen. Anybody that's an actual threat will never see the White House, and that's just what it is. And so I will gladly discuss electoral politics in countries where they have fair elections, like Nicaragua, like Honduras, like Colombia, these countries that are able to have them. There are countries that don't have them, like Guatemala, right? That like they don't have fair elections. Cambodia just had an election, and the United States is already saying it's unfair because the president supports China. It wants to develop a relationship with Beijing. So they're saying that they don't represent democracy. I mean, this is just, so I get it. I get why people support him, why they feel like there's nobody else. But again, I think we're getting stuck in this endless cycle of electoralism yet again, with somebody that's, just because everybody sucks doesn't mean that you have to accept inferior candidate. And I just feel like none of the candidates are there, including Cornell. You don't see me supporting Cornell West either, because I'm not supporting Cornell West either. I think he is good on Israel-Palestine, but he's not good on other things, so I'm not going to support him either.
Surely isn't good on COVID. It surely isn't good on COVID, and still using the same language of this person's a neo-fascist while the other person's just a neoliberal disaster. I have issues with that. It almost seems like you're trying to justify the push him from the left Biden type of thing, where one of our friends in Nicaragua that they met, and they're like, the biggest issue they had with Cornel West is he's a vote for Biden, push him from the left type of guy, and that's like no bueno for them. So I understand where people are coming from. Let's get to the actual hearing itself. And our friend, Congresswoman Ramen Noodle Hair, she stole the show again. They tried to vote to censor RFK at speaking at Congress at a hearing against censorship. Here we go.
Point of order pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, which Mr. Kennedy is violative of. I move that we remove into executive session because Mr. Kennedy has repeatedly made despicable anti-Semitic and anti-Asian comments as recently as last week. Rule 11, Clause 2 says, whenever it is asserted by a member of the committee that the evidence or testimony at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate any person, or it is asserted by a witness that the evidence or testimony that the witness would give at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate the witness, and it goes on. Mr. Kennedy, among many other things, has said, I know a lot now about bioweapons. We put out hundreds of millions of dollars into ethnically targeted microbes. The Chinese have done the same thing. In fact, COVID-19, there is an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are...
A lady making a motion or a speech?
I've made a motion to move into executive session because Mr. Kennedy's testimony...
Mr. Chairman, I move to table the motion.
The gentleman from Kentucky has moved to table.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a roll call vote on the motion to table.
Well, let me ask the question. The question is on the motion to table. The gentlelady has asked for a roll call vote. The clerk will have to step back for a second. The clerk will have to come in. We'll call the roll on the motion to table, and then we can get back to testimony.
I think the witnesses can sit in the chairs sitting behind.
I'll leave that up to the clerks. If the clerks are comfortable with that. Yeah, why don't we do that? Maybe we can go right down here.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Gentleman from Louisiana.
Is it the custom of this committee to censor viewpoints that we disagree with from witnesses?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion on the table.
There's a motion and the vote's been
Move
called.
into executive session.
We're waiting for the clerks.
Is violative of Rule 11, Clause 2.
Waiting for the clerks. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa. Mr. Massey.
Yes, to not censor.
Mr. Massey votes yes. Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart votes yes. Ms. Stefanik.
Yes.
Ms. Stefanik votes yes. Mr. Gates. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes yes. Mr. Armstrong.
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong votes yes. Mr. Stubbe. Mr. Bishop.
Yes.
Mr. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Kamak.
Yes.
Ms. Kamak votes yes. Ms. Hageman. Ms. Hageman votes yes. Ms. Pasquette.
No, I want to follow the rules that the Republicans made at the beginning of this conference with these House rules, so no.
Ms. Pasquette votes no. Mr. Lynch.
No.
Mr. Lynch votes no. Ms. Sanchez.
No, because it's violative of the rules.
Ms. Sanchez votes no. Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
No to allowing a witness to degrade and
This is not
defame
speech
others
time.
and violate the rules and not have his testimony and degradation amplified
Mr. Chair.
rather than given an executive session.
Chair.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz votes no. Mr. Connolly.
No to the Soviet Politburo.
Mr. Connolly votes no. Mr. Garamendi.
No.
Mr. Garamendi votes no. Mr. Allred. Ms. Garcia.
No.
Ms. Garcia votes no. Mr. Goldman.
No to hate speech.
Mr. Goldman votes no.
Hate speech. Hate speech.
Mr. Gates. Yes.
Mr. Gates. Aye. Mr. Gates votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 8 noes.
The motion to table is agreed to.
So pretty much they voted to table it. Fam, I just put a tweet in there. T-Slice, let's jump up to that real quick. There's been breaking news from RFK about tomorrow's event that we just showed with Rabbi Shmuley. If you can bring that on up, here you go. The New York City Society of Ethical Culture just canceled my event with Rabbi Shmuley for tomorrow night. They're evidently under tremendous pressure since they violated a binding contract and canceled without explanation. This shows the DNC's fierce determination and awesome power to censor criticism of an embattled president. We are looking for another venue for tomorrow in Manhattan. Stay tuned. Fam, the DNC got their way anyways, and you can see what happened was Thomas Massey had jumped on in and said, let's table this bullshit and set it aside. And they did. The votes were 10-8. They had more Republicans there to make sure that they can table Debbie Wasserman Schultz's motion, fam. It was a clown show from the get-go, man. It really was. But the thing I like to point out is what they were trying to go after him was, let's get the next Debbie Wasserman Schultz tweet up there. Do you have anything to say, fam? Because there is a lot of parallels to what happened with Donald Trump when he was what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out.
Indicted?
When he was impeached, excuse me, about the phone call he had with Zelensky. And the thing that was driving me crazy is that they impeached him over this particular phone call, yet they weren't paying attention. People weren't paying attention to what the Democrats were doing in Ukraine. But go ahead and play Debbie Wasserman Schultz, unless you got a comment, fam.
No, just play.
Here. A few months ago, Mr. Kennedy, you compared COVID public health policies to barbaric murderous tactics of Nazi Germany, saying that Jewish people in Nazi Germany had more freedom than Americans facing COVID health restrictions. In hindsight, Mr. Kennedy, do you reject this absurd and deeply hurtful and harmful comparison, or do you still stand by it?
Congressman, what you are saying is a lie.
You said it.
I did not. I never
Okay.
I never, ever.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer into the record when Mr. Kennedy said that. I reclaim my time. In discussing COVID public health measures, you made light of the genocide against Jewish people by saying, and I quote, even Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps to Switzerland. You could hide in an attic like Anne Frank did. Mr. Kennedy, do you think it was easy for Jewish people to escape systematic slaughter of Nazis? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good. Mr. Kennedy, do you think it was just as hard to wear a mask during COVID as it was to hide under floorboards or false walls so you weren't murdered or dragged to a concentration camp? Yes or no?
Excuse me?
That's a question, yes or no?
I didn't hear your question.
Okay. I said, do you think it was just as hard to wear a mask during COVID as it was to hide under floorboards or false walls so you weren't murdered or dragged to a concentration camp?
Of course not. That's ridiculous.
But that's a comparison that you made.
I did not
Kennedy,
make that comparison.
Were the measures taken to contain the spread and fatalities related to COVID in any way at all comparable to the murder of 6 million Jews? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Let's be very clear here. There's no legitimate comparison to the Holocaust. It doesn't matter if you're talking about AI, vaccine mandates, or anything else. There is no comparison. And if this were a slip of the tongue, Mr. Kennedy, or a one-off comment, we would all move on. But there's a deeply disturbing pattern. In 2015, you apologized to all those, quote, whom I offended by my use of the word Holocaust to describe the autism epidemic. When discussing efforts to encourage others to get vaccinated for COVID-19, you said Nazis did that in the camps in World War II. They tested vaccines on gypsies and Jews. That was a quote. Like before, you apologized for invoking the Holocaust, saying, quote, to the extent my remarks caused hurt, I am truly and deeply sorry. These are not real statements of contrition or remorse. They are passive-aggressive non-apologies that blame the listener for reacting to the lie you just spread.
So, fam, you can see they're stating that he's not Zionist enough for them. And the whole thing about it is that the comment that came up, and I didn't put it in there because I got so much shit in there, and I know we're already at an hour and a half, and there's so much stuff to go over. But he was citing a test from the Cleveland Clinic, pretty much somebody from the Cleveland Clinic that showed that we had talked about how these COVID vaccines, they have the COVID vaccines or the COVID virus itself, can target different ethnicities. This is the bioweapons testing we're talking about. So instead of going after and start looking at, are they really, what's going on with the bioweapons testing over here? What's going on with gain of function? What are we doing, right? As far as that's concerned, they're concentrating on what he was saying, the fact that it didn't affect Ashkenazi Jews the way it affected whites and blacks in America. And that's what they concentrated on, and that's what they use as an avenue of attack, rather than look at the actual crux of what's going on itself, how this bioweapons testing is getting out of hand. What happened with Putin when he removed those, and you guys are doing amazing work at RT this right now. Guys, if you haven't gone over to RT and see the work they're doing on this right now about the bioweapons testing in Ukraine, they were bioweapons testing in Ukraine on the doorstep of Russia, and that's why Putin immediately, when he went in there, goes, they're all gone. He's going to wipe them out. This is something serious that's going on. It might have been something as small as the coronavirus this time, But next time, fam, it could be something really, really, really bad. And me personally, I know that RFK has been great when it comes to COVID-19. I don't think he's been good enough when it comes to saying that he's going to end gain of function testing on day one. That's what needs to be said from him, because we need to stop this testing immediately. And when the Patriot Act came along, all of a sudden, boom, they reopened the door for more bioweapons testing like never before. This is a serious problem that can get really out of hand.
When RFK was talking about and the Jews and all of that, he was talking about literally the Nazi element of what they did to people who were Jewish, who were Romani. I wouldn't even say Gypsy, because that's like, looked down upon, that word. But Romani, Slavic, Jewish, all of these ethnicities that were looked upon as less than Aryan from the German superior white race. Those elements, those Nazi elements of testing different things, experimenting on people, are the same type of experiments that were done in Ukraine. Those are the same type of experiments that were arguably done on people, on Americans, on people in a lot of these Western countries. And by the way, they have also been done in Africa. They have been done to people in the global South. And these elements, in many ways, are racially motivated. In many ways, they're motivated by power and an attempt to control populations. And he's alluding to that. He wasn't in any way saying that whatever the hell Debbie Wasserman-Schultz was trying to say that he was saying, that he was being racist. He was talking about a reality. In fact, he was pointing out the racism against these minority and ethnic groups, and how that's being used with biological weapons, which, as Pasta mentioned, if you have a chance, go watch RT documentary Biological Warfare on what Ukraine has done and what's been done. And Russia, of course, has talked about this at length. I don't even think Kennedy has really talked about it that much at all. He's mentioning it there, but he's never even, he said it a few times, but there's been a lot of people that have been talking about it before. So they're trying to twist that into being anti-Semitic. The guy and his family have clearly been pro-Israel for a very long time. So there's really,
still smearing
it's
him as
just
being
stupid.
too anti-Semitic, fam. It's ridiculous.
It's just really stupid. It's just really dumb, because like he's far too pro-Zionist. So when they say he's being anti-Semitic, it almost makes people like him more. It's so stupid. They're elevating him more than they're alienating people from him, because they clearly look like idiots calling somebody that's a Zionist anti-Semitic. The guy is clearly going to bat for Israel every chance he gets, and you're still trying to paint him as being anti-Semitic. It's clear that this is about COVID. It's clear that this is about his points of view on it, that they don't want the public to listen or hear to, now that more and more people have admitted that the vaccines were not what they thought they were. And more people are coming out and telling their stories, like we caught on it early on in 2020 as it was happening, but not everybody did. And then more and more people started coming out of the woodworks and started, talking about all this stuff. And, now there's a community of people on the left who question this, people who work, I have friends who are nurses who question the whole thing. I mean, this is a very popular point of view, far more popular than people have made you believe it is. There's only a few small niche of idiots, branch Covidians, that are still calling people anti-vaxxers. But the vast majority of people have, at least, even people who have received the vaccine, have at least questioned what is going on. So this attempt just makes him more popular. And if the Democratic Party wanted to really sink him, I feel like they're actually doing the opposite, especially when it comes to the COVID situation. And it's just so ridiculous that this is what they're doing.
The Streisand effect, right, fam?
Oh, I thought it was a video. I was waiting for the video.
Is there a video cheese slice, or it's just no? It's just a put it up again so we can see it. cheese slice. So I was waiting for a video as well. But yeah, fam, it is kind of ridiculous. You know, it's funny too because a lot of the, you know, when we're talking about our good friend Martha Avila, who I think she has the Instagram, the Food Industrial Complex. Is this thing lower? The Food Industrial Complex, the food, whatever. She has a great Instagram where she talks about this, and she plays this video of Putin and the Russian Federation banning all the GMOs in the foods from Russia. It's not allowed. The bulk of RFK's work, you know, has been about fighting against all these polluters for quite some time. And that's a shame that that stuff's not being talked about, because if there's anybody who's got a grasp on our food and how it should be handled, it would be RFK. We're not even talking about that. He did make a statement in this hearing. He goes, you know, for years I've been trying to remove the mercury from all the fish, but, you know, I tried to remove the mercury from the vaccines. I fought for that. They called me anti-vax. But when I tried to remove the mercury from the fish, they didn't call me anti-fish. And people laughed. It was pretty funny. And the craziness of this is not just Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it's all the other Democratic members of Congress. Look at the way that Congressman Connolly tries to twist this. It's like up is down, down is up. And, oh, well, you know, you're talking about censorship, but what about my rights to say this stuff? Take a look at this, fam.
I've been in
Well, wait a
this
second.
Congress
Go ahead. I was going to just read the tweet real quick. He says, in my 15 years of Congress, I've been in this Congress for 15 years, and I never thought I would descend to this level of Orwellian dystopia. This is the Democrat who's been standing behind censorship the whole time, who's been standing behind deplatforming somebody, who's gone to Congress and telling the social media companies that they're not censoring enough, and he's saying what's happening to him is Orwellian. Suddenly the tools of the trade are not to get the truth, but to distract, distort, deflect, and dissemble. Once again, it is not the government's job to tell you what is real and what is fake. That's for you and I to decide. They're not supposed to be getting involved in that. They're not supposed to be censoring.
Years. And I never thought we'd descend to this level of Orwellian dystopia.
Wow.
Suddenly the tools of the trade
on.
are not to get at the truth, but to distract, distort, deflect, and dissemble. To disagree is censorship. To try to correct the facts is to infringe on my right of free speech. Of course, it only works one way. The name of Dr. Fauci has been invoked. I'd love to have him here as a witness to describe his travail in being censored. But of course, with that right-wing censorship comes intimidation and threat and intimations of violence. And a wink blink that, by the way, violence, you know, can be justified. The violence, for example, here on January 6th has been explicitly excused by some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle as a bunch of tourists who got a little out of hand, a little overexcited. 5 are dead, including my constituent, Capitol Hill police officer, who died the next day from the trauma and shock of that experience. And ironically, talk about free speech and duty, he voted for Donald Trump. But his duty was to be here that day.
You know, you could always trust the guy who's saying, I wish Fauci was here, you know, so we can get some honesty with his assistant behind him with the mask on still. And it's Orwellian, fam, now. It's only one-sided, fam. It's not about getting the truth out or setting the record straight, which, once again, is not their fucking job. They don't have the right to do that. They're not allowed to tell you what is true and at least keep you from you deciding what is true and what is false by censorship. That's our job. We make the decisions for ourselves, not you. You don't tell us what the truth is and then censor us and saying just take our word for us. That is censorship.
Yeah, I mean, this is just ridiculous. Fauci was never censored. He was plastered on every TV screen, on every book, on every fucking candle that existed. And he was made some sort of saint and sold and marketed to Americans like some sort of like actual saint from like a Jesus picture. That's how Fauci was like presented to everybody. And he was not censored in any way, shape, or form. I mean, this is just, to me, this whole thing is just ridiculous because they're making Kennedy to be a martyr, which he isn't. He's just, like they're doing the opposite that they want to accomplish here. They're censoring somebody for the wrong, like they shouldn't be censoring them at all, but they're criticizing him for the wrong reasons. So it's just laughable at this point. Obviously he shouldn't be censored. It's just funny. And I don't expect anything more from the Democrats at this point. I mean, this is who they are. This is who they've been for years now. And this is who they're going to be. So again, they're making Kennedy a martyr as somebody who's standing up to the Democrats when he really, when you go down the list, has a lot of similar policies to them. It's just certain areas where he's better at that are, don't get me wrong, they're important areas, but still at the end of the day, when you go in already giving in, by the time you get into power, if you're allowed in, you pivot. So I can't take it seriously because it's so ridiculous.
Well, talking in the realm of seriousness, let's get to the most serious Congresswoman Plaskett. I think she got more attention from her little person behind her kind of mouthing. They didn't know if, she was the lizard person making the voices or she was just mouthing what was going on. I know a lot of people spend time with that, but here we are. When all else fails, make sure you mention MAGA Republicans to help save you. Good.
I want to be abundantly clear about what else is happening in this room. The MAGA Republicans are trying to scare social media companies into not taking down blatantly false information in the lead up to our 2024 presidential election. Chair Jordan knows, as we do, that when conspiracy theories succeed, so does Donald Trump. Russia interfered in our 2016 election. They attempted in our 2020, and they're going to try to interfere in the 2024 presidential election. We note that Russian trolls sought to suppress the Black vote by unleashing a torrent of social media posts designed to stoke racial tensions and spread incorrect voting information. I want to be abundantly clear about what else is happening.
Ma'am, she mentioned fucking Russiagate again, as if it was true. Still on the same friggin' lie. Still, Plaskett. I mean, it's blowing that she would even go there. And how long is this same argument going to last that it's all about MAGA Republicans doing all this stuff and we got to do whatever we need to do to stop them, and that includes censoring them? Fox News, of all people, caught up with these particular congressmen and women, Plaskett, Connolly, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and let's see what they had to say when they were caught with a microphone in front of their face.
Do you think that Democrats are proving RFK Jr.'s point by trying to stop him from coming today and censor him, that Democrats are unfairly censoring him?
I'm not going to respond to a loaded question like that. You've already decided in your own answer.
What are you afraid that he would say under oath today that you want to stop even the American people from having the opportunity to hear?
I'm not afraid of anything he would say. I just don't want to hear him.
What do you say to people who are concerned that you were trying to censor RFK Jr. by trying to not let him come today?
Oh, that's not censorship. Censorship would not be allowing someone to speak. He can speak. That doesn't give him necessarily the ability to have to do it in the halls of Congress.
Trying to censor him today proved his point that he is being...
Censor him? We were trying to make sure that he didn't cause more harm with his outrageous testimony.
I don't think you want to bring bigots before the Congress, but apparently that's par for the course with this majority.
Do you think that Democrats are proving...
Who's supporting these people right now at this point? Who the hell is going to stand behind this mentality right now that it's okay for them to do what they want to do? Well, we weren't just censoring him. We were just trying to make sure he couldn't cause more harm.
It doesn't matter who stands behind it because they choose who they want. I don't know what else to say. Of course. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Like, that nobody listens to them, that nobody likes them. They're still going to win because this is exactly how they do things. This is exactly, they choose what they want, who they want to listen to, who they promote, and anybody that they don't, then they just won't. And so this is why you don't need to placate to them because they're never going to accept you. I said the same thing about Bernie Sanders placating to them. It's the same shit, like, for obviously different reasons and different issues. But I mean, if you're going to placate to them, it's not going to gain you any points. They're not ever going to accept you once they deem you an outsider. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. There are some nuggets that come out of the little nuggets of goldenness, and that's when you get a chance to talk about some of the stuff that happened during the whole COVID situation. Fam, Cheese Slice, go ahead and put this up right now real quick, because Congressman Roy, RFK Jr., took 5 minutes on unloading the truth about vaccine safety before Congress after getting sued heavily for the DTP vaccine. Wyeth, or Weth, I can't remember, is it Wyeth? Now Pfizer went to the Reagan White House and demanded liability protections within the threat of getting out of the vaccine businesses. President Reagan asked Wyeth why they couldn't make safer vaccine. They answered that they couldn't because vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. And so anybody who claims vaccines are safe and effective, which we are claiming that they are safe and effective because we're on YouTube, the industry itself got immunity from liability by convincing President Ronald Reagan and Congress that the vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. So the next time you anti-COVID protocols conservatives go over and bend down and kiss Ronald Reagan's ass, remember this. Hit it, baby.
I don't want President Trump misusing the FBI, and I don't want President Biden. I don't should want anybody.
Amen. And I agree with that completely. Let me characterize my understanding of something and get your perspective on it. Following the 2016 election, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Collins, Peter Marks met with you, to the best of my understanding, regarding vaccine safety, in part as a result of your engagement with President Trump. And at that meeting, you requested evidence of a vaccine undergoing placebo-controlled trial safety tests prior to licensing. After making a show of looking for the document, Dr. Fauci informed you, to the best of my understanding, that the document was back in Bethesda and that he would eventually send the document to you. The document, to the best of my knowledge, was never sent, and that you sued HHS for documents showing and trying to figure out the truth of the matter, and that you found that not one study was done on pre-licensing safety testing for COVID vaccines. After a year, HHS finally sent you a letter stating, we don't have any. This means, to the best of my understanding, that nobody knows the risk profiles for these products or whether they avert more harm than they cause. And as a result, there's no real science behind these statements, but rather guesswork. Is that a fair characterization of what you've experienced?
That is a fair characterization. We had looked for many years to find a pre-licensing safety trial of any of the 72 vaccines doses that are now essentially mandated. They're recommended, but that's effectively mandated for American children, and we have not been able to find any. And every other medication requires, prior to licensing by FDA, at the company perform a safety trial that compares health outcomes in a placebo group and a similarly situated vaccine group. My assumption was that was done for vaccines. We found out that it hadn't been, that it was not, they were exempt. And I made that statement publicly. Dr. Fauci contradicted me, and when President Trump ordered him to meet with me, him and Francis Collins and a group of my colleagues, I said to them at that time, you've said publicly that I've been dishonest about that. Can you show us a single pre-licensing safety trial, placebo-controlled safety trial for any of the 72 vaccines required for American children? And he made that show of looking through a file, and he said, well, they're back in Bethesda. And I said, well, you send them to me. And I never heard from him again. So we sued the HHS under the Freedom of Information law, after a year of litigation, they sent us a letter which is posted on CHD's website that acknowledges that they are now not able to locate a single pre-licensing safety trial, placebo control for any of the vaccines that are now mandated for children. These are zero liability vaccines.
And so if I might interject in just limited time, and I hope you can expand on that further. I know my friend from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, will probably expand on this later, but your uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy, was a pretty strong opponent of sweeping immunity from liability for manufacturers of vaccines. And did he not introduce an amendment to repeal the so-called PrEP Act, the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, when he was a senator?
Yes, he did. And, the immunity which was passed in 1986, neither the Republicans or Democrats wanted it. Ronald Reagan at that time, who signed the bill, said, and Wyeth was the company that was pushing it, and they were saying that they were losing $20 in downstream liabilities for every dollar that they made in profits from vaccines. They were going to get out of the business if they were not granted immunity. Ronald Reagan said to them at that time, why don't you make the vaccines safe? And Wyatt said, because they're unavoidably unsafe, which is true of most medicines. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I think we need to be honest and we need to have good science. That's all I've ever argued.
And closing out my time here, I would just say this. My father had polio. I understand the ravages of that disease. I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to have a polio vaccine, but I also want the truth being sought. I want to know the health impacts of the polio vaccine going forward and every other vaccine that's being administered. And I'll just close by saying and asking, I know that this is informed by a great deal of conversations you've had with mothers and moms who came up to you. And if you could expand on that, I'll yield back.
Yeah, I mean, I was dragged kicking and screaming into this space because I was confronted by, when I was touring the country on suing companies about mercury and fish. And by the way, people, I spent 30 years trying to get mercury out of the fish in this country, and nobody ever called me anti-fish. At that time, we were trying to get mercury out of vaccines because mothers were coming and saying, my child was injured by the vaccine. These were many, many hundreds, literally, of mothers with intellectual disabilities. And they said, nobody's listening to us. The Democrats aren't listening to us. Republicans aren't listening to us. And I felt like I should listen to them and actually read the science. And that is what got me down into the time. And by the way, it's the worst career decision I have ever made.
Time of the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. You'll back.
Fam, I got to also say that Congressman Roy is great on Ukraine and Russia, too, as well. I mean, he's amazing when it came to that stuff. He was one of the conservatives to once speak out against it. And, once that right there is what RFK stands, but that's the reason to support him. Those right there and what he has talked about, the light he has shed when it comes to vaccines. I don't know if you remember when we were out hanging out, and I said to a lot of the people there, I'm like, how much time is spent in medical school for doctors on vaccines? To be a general practitioner of sorts. What is it? A general PhD, fam? You would know more than me. You're a certified TV doctor. And I said, like, hardly any, like 1 day. It's like they don't spend a lot of time on it. There is not a lot of time, study, and proper science spent on vaccines. And it's just swept under the rug no matter what. So for people to go running around in the Democratic Party, these shit libs, it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective. And by the way, it is safe and effective for all your YouTubers out there. It's just ridiculous. It is totally ridiculous. And that is what he is all about, despite being an open Zionist.
Yeah, and if that's more important to you than other stuff, so, I understand you supporting him, but in spite of all that, I'm not going to support him. That's just that
No, I
simple.
get it. I'm not telling you to. Yeah, I'm not telling you to.
He's being censored, and it's wrong, but at the same time, this is what the Democrats do. It's nothing surprising. You have one more, right? Because this is
it backfired on him. He raised $5 million in 1 day after this.
Yeah. That's exactly what I said. Like, without even knowing that this happened,
you hit it on the
I
nose.
knew that this would backfire because that's exactly what this does. And again, it's just going to make him look like a victim, in spite of the fact that he has these Zionist policies. So, I mean, for me, it's like a lose-lose situation in terms of going after him for the wrong reasons. For me, you should go after him for the right reasons, but they're not going to do that because they're just a Zionist. So
we'll finish up with Thomas Massey's little because we got to throw some Thomas Massey. Got to throw the Libertarian in there, fam. I'm sorry. Even the Libertarians haven't got their shit together, and they've been having issues this whole week. I mean, everything was gone. It was like so many crazy things happened, fam, while we were in Nicaragua. Let's finish up with Thomas Massey. We'll get on to the next subject. Guys, 132 people on Rumble. Let's show us, you Rumble ranters. Let's get over there. Let's beat YouTube. They're at 165 right now. We got about 40 people on Rokfin. Here's Thomas Massey. We're going to finish out this section because I know what it's like to be censored too as well on election stuff. We all do. You know, when Fam was leaving Honduras, they were censoring her left and right. This is Thomas Massey talking about simple stuff that you state from the NIH or the CDC or the WHO or the W. You know what I'm saying? And they still censor you. Here is Thomas Massey. Let's wrap this.
6 minutes.
We won't watch the whole thing. Just a little bit. We'll cut it. We'll cut it about halfway through.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized, and this will be our last slide.
One of the immutable and undeniable tenets of immunology is natural immunity. But for 2 years, it was denied. It wasn't even just denied, it was censored. Mr. Saar, I noticed in the court ruling, in the case that you worked on, that they said that the court said that Facebook reported to the White House that it labeled and demoted posts suggesting natural immunity to a COVID-19 infection is superior to vaccine immunity. Is that true? Was that kind of censorship going on?
Yes, that kind of censorship was going on, and there were direct communications between the platforms and federal officials about natural immunity specifically that I think you've correctly quoted.
And thanks to the Twitter files, we found out that the former FDA director who was on the board of Pfizer, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, wrote on August 27th, 2021 to Twitter executive Todd O'Boyle, who, by the way, was kind of one of the go-to people for the White House also to coordinate with when they wanted something suppressed, requested Twitter take action against a post about natural immunity. You know what's amazing to me is Scott Gottlieb, who works for Pfizer, who's a former FDA director, went to Twitter the day I got censored on natural immunity, my post, a congressional post. Now, the other side said, well, your tweet's still up, your post is still up. What do you mean you're getting censored? What they did is they labeled it and they denied anybody's ability to actually comment on it, and they deboosted it. So I simply said natural immunity is better than vaccine immunity. We had studies showing that. They took it, they censored it. So the next day I tried it again with a reference to Bloomberg, hardly a right-wing outlet or conspiracy generator, and they censored that one as well. This is astounding to me. Mr. Kennedy, can you talk about the censorship, the effort of the White House and pharma to suppress the acknowledgement of natural immunity and why they might have been doing that?
Well, again, there was an effort to suppress information, not, in fact, if you read the Twitter files and the email correspondence between Facebook and the White House, there was an acknowledgement that they were being asked and they were complying with censoring information that everybody knew to be true.
There you go. There you go. That's enough. That's all we need to say. They worked with the government, these big tech platforms, to censor the information that was going to be harmful to their little vaccine rollout. And that's what they did. Natural immunity for years, fam, was always okay. It was one of the best forms of protection, was natural immunity, but then they had changed everything. They had rewritten everything. So, you know, I just wanted to finish on that right now. Even Governor Massey, Congressman Massey was getting censored. The world is turned upside down. It is not the government's job to tell you and censor stuff, to say what is true, what is false. That's up to you, okay? They're not allowed to censor, yet they did. And this was a fucking clown show as far as I'm concerned. Fam, I did. We'll get out of here. We'll get on to the next subject real quick. Do you want to table this subject, or you want to?
No, I have to talk about it.
You got to talk about it. But really quickly, guys, and I put it
Wednesday.
really quickly, if you guys do want to help out, you can help me out. Grassroots campaign, givesendgo.com/RFK media. Help me on out. Fam will be in Moscow doing her thing. during the campaign. I want to get a microphone. I have a lot more tough questions to ask him, which you almost let the cat out of the bag, fam. Don't talk about what happened with the vaccine in Israel. I got to go ask RFK himself and get his opinion on that, as Netanyahu admit to using Israel as a petri dish. But guys, go to givesendgo.com/RFK media. While we were on this video, fam, the lady from Give Send Go called me. She wanted to pray. I told her I couldn't pray because we were doing a live show, but she wanted to pray for RFK. and she apologized about the Cuba thing, saying it wasn't their fault again. But guys, if you can help me out, givesendgo.com/RFK media. I'm also going to show up at Dr. Cornel West. I'm going to show up at the Libertarians if they can pick somebody. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. Anything you could do to help on out, please do so. And let's rock and roll.